let's get to it now.
Sure.
Undocumented immigration, undocumented immigrants, illegal immigration, deportations. What's your honest to God assessment on it? Because my lens is the only reason why you will open up the border is so that you can eventually improve and increase on the census for redistricting purposes, and eventually the votes of the blacks who are now starting to buck, who are now starting to talk. 10 years from now, their voice and words won't even matter anyway. Because, and this is the proof in the pudding, he was able to win every swing state, and look at the percentage of the black vote that Kamala got with that he didn't get. So without our vote, overwhelmingly 80, 70, 80 plus percent, irrelevant to winning an election.
Correct.
Irrelevant. Now reimagine if Biden or Kamala had won, all those people would still be here, and then we would be figuring out over the next 4 years how to fast track a way for them to stay, eventually get citizenship, and eventually be allowed to. Listen, if you think their goal is just to feed people, clothe people, give people subsidies just indefinitely, and that they have no expectations for why they're giving this to millions and millions of people in the black cities, you crazy. They're planning on replacing your ass.
Bro.
And they've tricked you again that every single time the Daves of the world, myself, Dr. Umar, and others, whenever somebody, Dr. Claude Anderson, it doesn't matter who it is, they've convinced you if they're not going with our agenda, they'll get us so good as a community, man. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts about the deportation and the illegal immigration, everything. They've gotten us so good that Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton could make a statement about deportations. And you don't think nothing of it, don't say anything about it. You even might even agree. And then when somebody that's on the other team says it, now you've been told that's fascist. Now you've been told that's wrong. Now you're told that's going against human rights. They've convinced you that when one person does it, it's fine. And when another person does it that we're supposed to hate, now it goes against the Constitution. Please tell me your thoughts about this, man.
Okay. First of all, let me say this as clearly and as gently as I possibly can. Get them all out of here. Get them out. I said what I said. Now, it's not a border issue. It's an economic strategy. And the group that is paying the biggest price for this is Black Americans. And this has been going on for decades. We're the only group in American history that gets told to be patient while politicians bend over backwards for people who just got here last week. You mean to tell me you can find billions of dollars in Chicago, in New York, in LA, but you can't fix black schools. You don't give any more than 3% of SBA loans to black businesses. You can't find black housing, but yet and still Brandon Johnson with his pointy-headed cockamamie ass is sitting around putting illegal immigrants in housing for black people, taking money out of the COVID relief fund that was earmarked for black people in densely populated black neighborhoods, and they cut the check with it for illegals who cross the border, but they continue at best, and people start dancing in the streets for it. The studies for reparations for the people who actually built the border. That's not xenophobia. It's mathematics. Every dollar diverted to someone who is undocumented is a dollar denied to the descendants of the enslaved, the foundational Black American. I am not anti-immigrant. I'm very pro-immigrant. But immigration is a process. It is a legal process. Shit, I can't go without getting a daggone notice for my Easy Pass bill without somebody trying to send me a ticket or something else. But yet and still, you can cross the border illegally and get food, clothing, housing, job training, and job placement. You know it. But we can't get anything to improve our communities. But the churches look great. The liquor stores are fine. The dispensaries are fine. And look, Planned Parenthood is still getting money, killing 40 million black babies. Yeah, to hell with these illegals. Especially, number one, we've got Democrats who are saying they care about us, and if we don't vote for them, then we ain't black. We got Republicans talking about America first. But how is this America first when Americans, not just foundational black Americans, but veterans? What about, the hungry, the homeless? Like people who have at one point or another or are continuing to pay taxes and pay to keep infrastructure up, to keep this country going, can't get anything. But the folks who can barely speak the English, They getting everything.
It's like the level of propaganda and how great they programmed. And shout out to Mika. For those who aren't aware, she's been on multiple different platforms, including Anton. Mika, you got to come on the show at some point. Make sure you reach out to me so I can interview you for sure, so we could talk more about these topics. They've convinced an entire group. There's no money for you, but there's money for people who just got here yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
They've convinced. So it's like, I'm like, can y'all just slow down and see that the same people who give you nothing, who they're looking at you while your taxes are going up. Mm-hmm. They're looking at you while jobs are getting shipped overseas. And they're telling you to keep voting for the people who keeps bringing more people here while giving those people money.
Yes. That's exactly it. And you're just supposed to say, oh yeah, that's normal. You know what it's like? It's like the last 40 minutes of the original Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to these troughs of illegals that we just keep funneling in here.
Listen, all these white folks, not even white folks, the white men in all these different countries talking about the great replacement theory. This is all great replacement theory. And in real time, y'all don't even realize who's being replaced.
Chapter 9, Political Education Neglected. Some time ago, when Congressman Oscar D. Priest was distributing by thousands copies of the Constitution of the United States, certain wiseacres were disposed to make fun of it. What purpose would such an act serve? These critics, however, probably did not know that thousands and thousands of Negro children in this country are not permitted to use school books in which are printed the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution of the United States. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison are mentioned in their history as figures in politics rather than as expounders of liberty and freedom. These youths are not permitted to learn that Jefferson believed that government should derive its power from the consent of the governed. Not long ago, a measure was introduced in a certain state legislature to have the Constitution of the United States thus printed in school histories. But when this bill was about to pass, it was killed by someone who made the point that it would never do to serve Negroes to study the Constitution of the United States. If the Negroes were granted the opportunity to pursue this document, they might learn to contend for the rights therein guaranteed. And no Negro teacher who gives attention to such matters of the government is tolerated in those backward districts. The teaching of government or the lack of such instruction then must be made to conform the policy of keeping the Negro in his place. In like manner, the teaching of history in the Negro area has had its political significance. Starting out after the Civil War, the opponents of freedom and social justice decided to work out a program in which would enslave the Negroes' mind insomuch as the freedom of their body had to be conceded. It was well understood that if, by teaching the history of the white man, could be further assured of his superiority, and the Negro could be made to feel that he had always been a failure, and that subjugation of his will to some other race is necessary, then he would still be a slave. If you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, continuing my reading of Carter G. Woodson's amazing book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Chapter 9 is what we into, political education neglected, right? And so I started this off with a video from the brother Jeff St. James. He was interviewing the business bully Dave Anderson, and they were talking about basically the politics that Black Americans are manipulated by every 2 to 4 years, and how we fail at playing politics, how we fail at even interacting in politics and being active in politics. But Carter G. Woodson is laying the foundation of saying, well, a part of that is our political ignorance. And our political ignorance comes from a deliberate plan to make sure that we don't learn about politics truly. We don't learn about the laws. We don't learn about the Constitution. We don't learn about the documents that help to make up this country. And we don't have the masses of us, I'm not saying everybody, but the masses of us don't have a full understanding of politics or even how to engage in politics to be able to get what we need. Because the brothers was having a very important and real conversation about us being replaced by the immigrants. We've been talking about that on this channel for a while. Black Americans, matter of fact, Dr. Claude Anderson said it first. He talked about it in Powernomics in his lectures. If you go back and look at his lectures, plenty of lectures on this channel you can go look at with Dr. Claude Anderson, talking about not only Black people becoming fourth-class citizens, but Black people being relegated to perpetual nothingness. Like we're going to, he told us that we're going to be replaced by the Hispanics. He told us that we're going to be replaced by the Asians. He told us we're going to be relegated to the bottom. He told us that if we're only getting crumbs now, we're going to get the crumbs from the crumbs from the crumbs from the crumbs, because we're going to be relegated to a fourth-class citizenship. And this is where we find ourselves. And they talked about the replacement theory. It's happening. It's literally happening. They're literally bringing in people to replace us. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? Sadly, for the majority of us, the answer is nothing. Because the majority of us are going to continue playing politics the way that they've been playing it, because it's comfortable. Too many Black people are okay with getting nothing for their votes because they believe that they're going to be on the right side of history, and they believe that they're fighting against racism. They're fighting against white supremacy, not understanding you are also helping to support racism and white supremacy. You think racism and white supremacy is only relegated to the Republican Party? Okay. Which one do you prefer? Death by 1,000 cuts, having your head taken off? The swift way or the slow way? Either way, you being taken out. And it's getting into the psychology of the oppressed. Like I said, if you can control a man's thinkings, you don't have to worry about their actions. They programmed us. If Carter G. Woodson can figure this out and write this in the book, don't you know these white people understand this very well, because they did it to us. Malcolm X told us that we're political chumps. We don't know what real power is. We think talking junk makes us powerful. We think talking junk makes people afraid of us. It doesn't. People be laughing at us. We got to do better. We got to be better. Like this is not a game that we're playing out here. This is our lives. We're literally at war. And we don't give a damn. Most of us are just out here just floating along, just going along with it, just going through the motions. And it's okay, because like the brother said in the video, the live video that I did on Tuesday, like the brother said, hey man, why try to have Black unity? Because that's gonna mess up your immediate money. Why should we care about politics that affect us as a whole? We should only care about what affects us as individuals. Well, how was that working out for us? That thinking has helped to relegate us to a fourth-class citizenship. These other groups of people are not here to unite with us. There's no BIPOC coalition. These people are using us as leverage to lift themselves up. We are the footstools for these other groups of people. And too many Negroes are comfortable with bending over and make sure that other people can use them to step up. Too many Black people are fighting for things that literally hurt us. The ignorance of us, being bombastic and ignorant. That's not a good look. We got to do better. So we are, like I said, we're getting further into chapter 9, political education neglected. Of course, you know, I have my opening summary, my opening statement about this chapter, my most important bullet points, as well as my key points. I'm going through my key points and giving you my summary as I read. So make sure you are listening and tuning in as we get into this. So let's start with our opening summary. Then we're going to get into the key points, and then I'm going to come back to the most important bullet points. And then we're going to close it out after we get through reading. Of course, you know, these chapters aren't that long, but we got to make sure that we get this information. The information is impactful, though. Please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. Let's help get this information out further and further. Let's bust through the shadow banning. If we support, we don't have to worry about the shadow banning. So please continue to support what we got going on over here. All we do is tell the truth. We know. Everybody don't like it, but we're going to continue to tell the truth. We're not here to make people feel good. We're here to tell the truth. All right. So in this chapter, right, Carter G. Woodson explains how Black people were systematically denied political education, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation, which happens, manipulation, which happens, and political irrelevance, which we are headed to. We are used as a tool to help further other people's causes. He critiques both the school system and Black leadership for failing to prepare Black citizens to engage in the political world with intelligence, strategy, and unity. We engage in the political world with emotions, irrational behavior, and more emotions, and more irrational behavior, and insanity, because we believe we're going to get a different outcome doing the same thing. Hey, you're racist if you vote for the Republicans, but you are a real Black person if you vote Democrat. Both parties, neither parties have done anything for us. Neither party. Forget both parties. We should have those parties bowing down to us, begging us for our vote. So our first key point is politics is a tool of power, but Black people were kept away from it. The second is the school system trained Black people to be politically passive. The third is Black voters were easily manipulated. The fourth is the educated Negro failed to educate the masses politically. The fifth is the Black political education prevents the development of strong Black leadership. And six is politics is not just voting, it's strategy. Seven is Woodson's solution: teach political intelligence. So let's get back to the first key point. Okay, so politics is a tool of power, but Black people were kept away from it. So Carter G. Woodson basically is explaining that political power helps to shape laws, it helps to shape budgets, rights, opportunities, and the direction of society. Yet Black people were systematically discouraged from engaging with politics. They were taught that politics is corrupt, politics is for white people. Your role in politics is to stay quiet or follow the right leader. This left the Black population politically powerless by design. Right? So laws, budgets, rights, opportunities, the direction of society, all of that comes out of group power, though. Let's not overlook that. That comes out of group power, group organization, group unity, Black unity. You don't get to have the ability to create laws, budgets, rights, opportunities in the direction of society without having power and being in power. So let's understand that. So this is what we're getting into, man. This is what we're getting into. So let's get back into the reading. Once again, I am reading from a PDF, so I don't know what chapter this is. What page this is. But starting off with the paragraph that says, this program so popular immediately after the Civil War. So that's where I'm starting at. This program, so popular immediately after the Civil War, was not new, but after this upheaval, its execution received a new stimulus. Histories written elsewhere for the former slaves area were discarded, and new treatments of local and national history in conformity with the recruits and propaganda were produced to give whites and blacks the biased point of view of the development of the nation and the relations of the races. Special treatments of the Reconstruction period were produced in apparently scientific form by propagandists who went into the first graduate schools of the East to learn modern historiography about half a century ago. Having the stamp of science, the thought of these polemics were accepted in all seats of learning. These rewriters of history fearlessly contended that slavery was a benevolent institution. The masters loved their slaves and treated them humanely. The abolitionists meddled with the institution, which the masters eventually would have modified. The Civil War brought about by fanatics like William Lloyd Garrison and John Brown was unnecessary. It was a mistake to make the Negro a citizen, for he merely became worse off by incurring the displeasure of the master class that would never tolerate him as an equal. And the Negro must live in this country in a state of recognized inferiority. And that goes back to the conversation that the guy, that divine guy was having with the Frojax guys, and they was basically talking about black people not being qualified to run our own society. They were talking about political ignorance of black people, but also they're repeating old false narratives about black people. Old stuff. If Frojax is saying the same thing that Carter G. Woodson was writing about, the narratives haven't really changed that much. Some of these theories may seem foolish, but historians, even in the North, have been warned to this point of view. They ignore the recent works of Ms. Elizabeth Dunham, Ms. H.T. Catherall, and Dr. Frederick Bancroft, who have spent years investigating slavery and slave trading. These are scientific productions with the stamp of the best scholarship in America. Treaties produced from such genuine documents as the court records of the slaveholding section itself. And these authors have rendered to the public a vulnerable service in removing the whitewash which pseudo-historians have been giving to slavery and slaveholders for more than a century. In preparation of Negroes, many of whom teach in the South, these biased Northern historians even convert them to such a faith. A few years ago, the author happened to listen to a conversation of Negro lawyers in one of our Southern cities in which they unanimously conceded practically every contention set forth in this program of propaganda. They denounced, therefore, all Reconstructionists who advocated equally and justice for all. These Negroes had the biased point of view of the rewriters like Claude Bowers and had never been directed to the real history of that drama as set forth by A.A. Taylor, Francis B. Sickums, and Robert H. Woodley of the New Southern School of Thought. These Negro critics were especially hard on Negroes of our day who engage in agitation for actual democracy. Negroes themselves in certain parts joined with the whites then in keeping out of the school teachers who may have been told enough to teach the truth as it is. They usually say the races are here getting along amicably now, and we do not want these peaceful relations disturbed by the teaching of new political thought. So doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like the rhetoric of the black conservatives? Isn't that the same thing that the black conservatives say? Not going back what a lot of the old folks say, there's nothing new under the sun. It says, once again, when they mean to say with respect to the peaceful relations of the races, then it is that the Negroes have been terrorized to the excuse me, my bad, not that. It says the Negro critics were especially hard on Negroes of our day who engage in agitation for actual democracy. Candace Owens, Officer Tatum, the Hodge twins, all them black MAGA people. One of the folk we're going to cover coming up this week, one of the black MAGA preachers, right? Negroes themselves in certain parts joined with the whites, Myron. Then in keeping out of the school teachers who may be bold enough, who may be old enough to teach the truth as it is. They usually say the races were here getting along amicably. That's what they say. America was fine until Obama. America was fine until you rabble-rousing Negroes and all these things that come around here. America was good, and then y'all want to come talking this equality stuff, and y'all come riling people up. Then they send the Negroes out to echo those same sentiments. So get back to the notes, right? The second key point, the school systems train black people to be politically passive, political chumps, as Malcolm X said it, right? Wilson argues that black education offered no study of political structures, no analysis of voting rights, no training of organizing, no understanding of political parties. I'm going to read that one again. No understanding of political parties, no lessons on how laws are made or how government operates. Instead, black people were taught obedience and caution, not agency and strategy. The result, a population present in America, but absent in its political life. We are just there to help other people win their elections. And I've been saying it for a while, and I'm gonna keep saying it, and I'm gonna repeat it here again. All right. Black people vote as adults the same way we voted in elementary school. Think about how we learned to vote. Most of us, and he's right, most of us learned nothing about political science, nothing about civics, right? So we go off of what we've always done and what we know, right? So in elementary school, we voted for the popular person that made us feel good. In middle school, we voted for the popular person that made us feel good. In high school, we voted for the popular person that made us feel good. When we turned 18, we got to college, we got in the real world, we've started voting for Democrats because they were popular and made us feel good. Or if we got mad at the Democrats, we went and voted for the Republicans because that made us feel good with no real political insight on what, how, when, where, why. Just voting because it makes us feel good. Ignorant and backwards. Now look at us. So what they mean to say with respect to the peaceful relations of the races then is that the Negroes have been terrorized to the extent that they are afraid to even discuss political matters publicly. There must be no expulsion of the principles of government in these schools, and this must not be done in public among Negroes with a view of stimulating political activity. Don't discuss politics in public, right? Negroes engaged in other spheres in such communities finally come to the point of accepting silence on these matters as a fixed policy, knowing that action to the contrary means mob rule, which may destroy the peace and property of the community. I'm gonna read that again. Knowing that action to the contrary means mob rule, which may destroy the peace and property of the community, they constitute themselves a sort of a vigilant community to direct their followers accordingly. A few years ago, a rather youthful-looking high school principal in one of the large cities was unceremoniously dismissed because he said to the president of the Board of Education in reply to his remark about his youthful bearing, "I'm old enough to vote." "Horrors," said the infuriated official. "Put him out. We brought him here to teach these Negroes how to work, and here he is thinking about voting." A few prominent Negroes of the place muttered a little, but they did nothing effective to correct the injustice, right? Bougie Negroes, policing, making sure white policies stay in place, right? In certain parts, therefore, the Negroes under such terrorism have ceased to think of political matters as their sphere. Where such things come into the teaching in more advanced work, they are presented as matters of concern to a particular element rather than as functions in which all citizens may participate. The result is that Negroes grow up without knowledge of political matters, which should concern all elements. To prevent the Negroes from learning too much about these things, the whites in the schools are sometimes neglected also. But the latter have the opportunity to learn by contrast, close observation, and actual participation in the affairs of government. And don't forget, white people are not opposed to having casualties as well. Negroes in certain parts then have all but abandoned voting, even at points where it might be allowed. In some cases, not as many as 2,000 Negroes vote in the whole state. By special legislation providing for literacy tests and the payment of taxes, the number of voters has been reduced to a negligible quantity. And the few who can thus function do not do so because they are often cautioned, they're often counted out when they have the deciding vote. And then another factor to consider, especially at these times when Carter G. Woodson put this book out, they were actually violent against people who were going to vote. There were actual real physical violence to help prevent people from voting. It wasn't just the poll taxes, it was poll taxes, all this other political ignorance, the systematic stuff, as well as real violence. But what that has done is create behaviors that was passed down. So us today, we just are mindless drones that just go along, and we're afraid to speak up. We're afraid to vote right, and we're afraid to do what we need to do, because that would mean we gotta do what we need to do for us. We got to be on our own. And we don't want to be on our own. We don't want to fix it for ourselves. We want white people to fix what they did, but that's not how it goes. So, let me read this. The tests established for the registration of suffrage were not intended to stimulate political education, but to eliminate the Negro vote by subterfuge. Negroes presenting themselves for registration are asked to do the all but impossible thing of expounding parts of the Constitution, which have baffled high courts. But whites are asked simple questions which almost almost any illiterate man can answer. In this way, the Negroes, however intelligent, are turned down, and all ignorant whites are promoted to vote. These laws then have retarded rather than stimulated the political education of both races. Such knowledge is apparently useless for Negroes and unnecessary for the whites, for the Negroes do not immediately profit by having it, and the whites may function as citizens without it because they already have a system of power in place. Remember that. All right, so our third bullet point: Black voters were easily manipulated. Because of a lack of political literacy, Black communities became vulnerable to exploitation by political bosses. I tell you anything, as long as it make you feel good, and as long as you believe I'm not racist, you're gonna rock with me. Easy targets for false promises. Hey, if y'all give us your votes, we're gonna do this, and never do it. Divided by factions, personalities, and petty disputes. Of course, they know how to play on our emotions. It's just emotions keeping us divided, right? Politicians could offer gifts, favors, or temporary benefits and secure votes without being accountable. In Woodson's words, an uninformed voter is as dangerous as a non-voter, because the uninformed voter will put people and policies in place that will hurt them drastically and have no idea. Our fourth key point is the educated Negro failed to educate the masses politically. Woodson criticizes the educated Negro who felt too superior to educate the community, refused to organize grassroots political meetings, avoided political education out of fear, sought personal prestige over collective empowerment. Rather than teach political strategy, these leaders imitated white political habits but failed to uplift the people they had no intention to do as well. Thus, political ignorance continued from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation to generation, and it's continued to be passed down. Vote blue no matter who. Why? Trump is here to save us. How? The effect of such a one-sided system is decidedly bad. One does not realize it until he walks with men and women of these districts who become of the denial of these privileges, have lost interest in political matters. A book agent working in the plantation area of Mississippi tested the knowledge of Negroes of these matters by asking them questions about the local and state government. He discovered that they knew practically nothing of this sphere. It was difficult to find any who knew who was president of the United States. One meets teachers, physicians, and ministers who do not know the ordinary operations of courts, the functions of the counsel, jury, or judge, unless such knowledge has come by the bitter experience of having been imprisoned upon by some tribunal of injustice. And that's true. A lot of Black people that I meet who are very, very, very familiar with the political justice system is because they had to go through it in a negative way, right? Some of the educated Negroes do not pay attention to such important matters as the assessment of property and the collection of taxes, and they do not inform themselves as how these things are worked out. An influential Negro in the South, then, is one who has nothing to do or say about politics and advises others to follow the same course. The elimination of the Negro form politics, then, has been most unfortunate. The whites may have profited thereby temporarily, but they showed very little foresight. How the whites can expect to make of the Negroes better citizens by leading them to think that they should have no part in the government of this country is a mystery. To keep a man above vagabondage and crime, he needs, among other things, the stimulus of patriotism. But how can a man be patriotic when the effect of his education is to the contrary? What little chance the Negro has to learn by participation in politics in most parts of the South is unfortunately restricted now to corruption. The usual stir about electing delegates to the National Republican Convention from the Southern states and the customary combat of the Negroes with lily white counterparts, with lily white corruptionists, are about all the political matters which claim their attention in the lower South. Neither the white nor the Black faction, as a rule, makes any effort to restore suffrage to Negroes. The objective is merely the control of delegates and federal patronage for the financial considerations involved. To do this, they resort to numerous contests culminating in closing hotels and bolting doors for secret meetings. This is the only activity in which Negroes can participate. They have learned to look upon it as honorable. Large numbers of Negroes become excited over the contest and give much publicity to it on the rostrum and in the press as a matter of great importance. That the RNC and the DNC, the methods of these corruptionists of both races, however, should be condemned as a disgrace to the state of the nation. Black people are big, big, big cheerleaders for these political parties, even though we get nothing out of these political parties. So, all right, another key point. Let's get to another key point. Key point number 5. The lack of political education prevents the development of strong Black leadership. Woodson explains that leadership without political knowledge is weak leadership. The leaders who cannot negotiate, leaders who can't understand legislation, leaders who can't build coalitions, they can't leverage political pressure, they can't advocate for community interest, they're not leaders. They're just talking heads. Because political education was missing, Black communities often ended up with symbolic leaders, talking heads, emotional leaders, talking heads, chosen leaders appointed by white power structures, leaders who do not know how to fight for their people. Without political strategy, the Black community remained divided and ineffective, especially without given leaders. The objective is merely to control the control of delegates and federal patronage for the financial considerations involved, right? To do this, they resort to numerous contests culminating, I read that. Instead of doing something to get rid of this ilk, however, we find the highly educated Negroes trying to plunge also into the mirror. One of the most discouraging aspects in Negro life recently observed was that of a presidential campaign. Prominent Negroes connected with 3 of our 4 leading institutions of learning temporarily abandoned their work to round up Negro votes for one of the candidates. The objective, of course, was to control the few ordinary jobs which are allotted to Negro politicians for their campaign services. When the successful candidate had been inaugurated, however, he carefully ignored them with the makeup of the personnel of his administration and treated Negroes with general contempt. When you think of the fact that the Negroes who are being thus used are supposedly the most reputable Negro leaders and our most highly educated men, you have to wonder whether the Negro has made any progress since emancipation. The only consolation one can get out of it is that they may not represent the whole race. That reminds me of Simone Sanders, when Simone Sanders was willing to tackle somebody for Joe Biden, put her physical health on the line for Joe Biden, and still didn't get picked for the positions in his administration. Yeah, that's what that reminds me of. In the North, the Negroes have a better chance at acquiring knowledge of political matters of the simple kind, but the bosses do not think it is advisable to enlighten them thoroughly. Negroes in parts are employed by campaigns, but they are not supposed to discuss such issues of the day as free trade, tariff for protection, the World Court, and the League of Nations. These Negro workers are supposed to tell their people how one politician seeking office has appointed more Negro messengers or chairwomen in the service than the other, or how the grandfather of the candidate stood with Lincoln and Grant through their ordeal and thus brought the race into its own. Another important task of these Negroes thus employed is also the abuse of the opposing party, showing how hostile it has been to the Negro, while highly favorable party was doing so much for the race. I'm just saying, we literally out here just repeating the same things over and over and over and over and over and over. Carter G. Woodson is explaining what happened during his time, but also explaining what's happening now in 2025. Damn, we ain't learned nothing. The course of these bosses have been interesting. At first, the white man used the Negro leader by giving him a drink occasionally. The next step was to give him sufficient money to set up drinks in the name of the white candidate. When drinking at the expense of the candidate became too common, the politicians fell back on the distribution of funds in small amounts. When this finally proved to be insufficient, however, the politicians had to go a bit further and provide Jim Crow jobs in certain back rooms, with the understanding that the functions of the so-called office will be merely nominal and the incumbents will have no close contact with white people. In this stage, the Negroes find themselves today. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All right, our sixth key point. Politics is not just voting, Black people. It is strategy. So one of Woodson's strongest points is that Black people must stop thinking of politics as a simple act of voting every few years. Real political education includes understanding the political machine. We don't. Studying laws. We don't. Knowing how to influence policy. We don't. Learning how local politics works. We don't engage in local politics. We only engage in national politics. Organizing neighborhood blocks. Training youth in civic responsibility. Without this foundation, voting becomes symbolic instead of transformative. How long have we been saying that? How long have we been telling Black people that? The undesirable aspect of the affair is that the Negro, in spite of the changes from the method of approach to that of another, is never brought into the inner circle of the party with which he is affiliated. He is always kept on the outside and is used as a means to an end. Is always kept on the outside and used as a means to an end. To obtain the messenger consideration which he receives, the Negro must work clandestinely through the back door. It has been unnecessary for the white man to change this procedure, for until recent years, he has generally found it possible to satisfy the majority of Negroes with the few political positions earmarked as Negro jobs, and to crush those who clamor for more recognition. It is unfortunate, too, that such a large number of Negroes do not know any better than to stake their whole fortune on politics. Remember that conversation last week with Roland Martin and King Randall, right? History does not show that any race, especially a minority group, has ever solved an important problem by relying altogether on one thing. Certainly not by parking its political strength on one side of the fence because of empty promises. These are Negroes who know better, but such thinkers are kept in the background by the traducers of the race to prevent the enlightenment of the masses. The misleading politicians are the only persons through whom the traducers act with respect to the Negro, and there are always a sufficient number of mentally undeveloped voters who will supply them a large following. Even the few Negroes who are elected to office are often similarly uninformed and show a lack of vision. They have given little attention to the weighty problems of the nation and in the legislative bodies to which they are elected. They restrict themselves as a rule to matters of special concern to the Negroes themselves, such as lynching, segregation, and disenfranchisement, which they have well learned by experiences. This indicates a step backwards for the Negroes who sat in Congress and in the state legislatures during Reconstruction worked for the enactment of the measures of concern to all elements of the population, regardless of color. Historians have not yet forgot what those Negro statesmen did in advocating public education, internal improvements, labor arbitration, the tariff, and the merchant marine. They do not want Black people fighting for anything that will make us better, stronger, wiser, or even more of a threat or competition to white power. Remember that. That's why we must be exactly that. So the seventh key point is Woodson's solution is to teach political intelligence, right? For Woodson, the remedy is clear. Black people must build systems of political education that will help understand how the government works, hold leaders accountable, vote with purpose, not emotion, develop leaders with political skill, unite around shared interest, form strong political blocks. He insists that political development is a requirement for racial uplift. It's not an option. It is not an option. So the most important bullet points, and the most important key points here are that Black people were deliberately excluded from political education, keeping them unaware of how political systems actually function. White-controlled institutions taught Black people to avoid politics altogether, reinforcing the belief that political engagement was not for the Negroes and it caused problems. Black voters were frequently misled, manipulated, and exploited due to a lack of political literacy, and it still continues to this day. The educated Negro often failed to educate the Black masses politically, leaving the community uninformed and divided. Without political education, Black people could not build effective leadership, protect their interests, or achieve real progress. Woodson argues that political knowledge, not just voting, is essential to genuine freedom and collective strength. So what are we doing and what have we learned? Clearly learned nothing. So to summarize everything, Dr. Carter G. Woodson basically exposes how Black people were intentionally kept politically ignorant by both the school system and the larger society. He argues that without political knowledge, Black people are easily manipulated, divided, and unable to protect their interests. Woodson critiques the educated Negro for failing to teach the masses how politics works, leaving the race without strategic leadership. He emphasizes that voting alone is not enough. True political empowerment requires studying government, understanding laws, and organizing as a unified community. For Woodson, political education is essential to freedom, and without it, the Black community will remain vulnerable and dependent. Vulnerable and dependent. We got to make a choice. We got to make a decision. That's the end of the chapter and the end of the reading and everything, end of the notes. But we have to make a choice. Continue to be political chumps, continue to be used politically as a means to someone else's end, or grow up, pull our pants up, become organized, unified, codified, and take our destiny into our own hands. We have the choice to make, even though I know what choice the majority of us are making now, but for those of us who want something different, we have a choice. We have a choice. I love you all. I love you all. I love you all. Please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share, continue to support everything we have going on over here. I thank everybody who continues to support us. Thank everybody who's helping this channel grow. We're going to continue to do what we do because we are about making our community better. I love you all. Make sure y'all catch the next video coming up.